keynote panelists for the day. We have Shereen Nassar, Global Director of Logistics Studies and Director of MSc Logistics and SCM programs from Heriot-Watt. We have Srinivasan, Head of Supply Chain Logistics Omnichannel from Al-Futtaim Group. We have Michael, Chief Business Officer and Founder from SC Junction. We have Praphul Chandra, Founder from Koinearth. We have Dr. Rakesh Singh, Chairman, Institute of Supply Chain Management. We have Baljeet, Director, Supply Chain Cloud Application Business Strategy and Sales Development from Oracle. I would request Baljeet to kindly take up the discussion further and request all the attendees to kindly type in and keep sending your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Rakesh, as always, you know, your passion is something else. I mean, you know, nobody can beat that. So thank you. It was a very insightful introduction. So to my panelists, good morning, good afternoon. It's just so lovely to have you again. Some of you have been, I think I've connected with you before, and it's a pleasure. So I'd just like to say thank you so much, Dr. Rakesh and the team, for giving me the opportunity to moderate this session. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's really, I think this topic has been talked about since the pandemic hit us, since it's nearly 8 months. We've been talking about resilient supply chains. We've been talking about visibility, etc. And you know, it's now time, as you know, has come where you know it's for us to kind of think, how can we build that resilience? Because we have experienced all sorts of behaviors, right? We've seen shelves being emptied, disruption of logistics, people working from home, you know, organizations or factories being shut down, you know, all of that behaviors, which, you know, it's really a wake-up call. And I always say this is such a wake-up call for organizations to be seriously thinking about changing their business platforms if they haven't already done so. So I think with this great panelists that we have got here, and I think it's a great, you know, we'd love to hear what is it that they are doing to build resilience in their organizations. So Srinivasan, hello, how are you?
Hi, Baljeet, I'm good. Thanks for connecting.
Hi, Baljeet. Me too. Thank you, thank you. So Srinivasan, you know, let me start with you. You know, when we talk about building resilience and all that stuff, you know, first of all, I'm really proud. You know, I'm also somebody who comes from a financial background and into supply chain, so I understand my end-to-end, you know, business processes. And you know, it's always the case that supply chain was always thought about to be in the back office function. It was all about, you know, kind of, you know, making sure your costs are in control, etc. Now, since the pandemic, it has really, supply chain is now in the driving seat. And it's so lovely to hear this, because now supply chain being in the driving seat can actually be part of the corporate strategies, because without having supply chain in your corporate strategies, you do not have the alignment between operational and finance businesses. So with that said, Srinivasan, Al-Futtaim, you know, is a very diverse organization. In fact, it's a very customer-centric organization. When I say, you know, diverse, you've got brands like retail, real estate, automotives, finance, etc. And you know, your founder is also very visionary, and your founder is always very passionate about being very customer-centric. And customer-centric is so important because, after all, the customer is the king. You need to satisfy your customer. So with that said, you know, customer-centric, I believe, is really the framework of driving this resilience and also making sure you change your business models to suit your customers' needs and expectations. So Srinivasan, do you, I mean, the question that I'd like to ask, do you think, first of all, you know, in this pandemic, there were certain organizations that actually did better. And I believe Al-Futtaim was also one of them in certain businesses. So can we have some insight on that one, please?
Sure. All right. Am I audible, Baljeet?
Yes, you are.
All right, thank you. Great. So, great to share my views with you. Yes, before stepping in, I would like to tell you that I feel supply chain is no more a back office function. If you see now, most of the time we are spending our effort, our bandwidth in terms of solving the customer issues. So every time when I come to office, the first one is I look at the customer dashboard. What are all the challenges? What are the complaints we have for our e-commerce? I'm just taking an example of my e-commerce journey. So my work, my entire supply chain strategy, whatever you say, operations, your tactical thing, everything starts from the customer pulse. So the customer insight is the key insight which I would take it up in order to build up my end-to-end supply chain strategy. Let me point you something very quickly. For example, we are doing cross-border e-commerce. I just want to give you one real-time example. During one of our previous shipments, because of one item, you have different regulations in different countries. So one of the countries, particular made in origin has been banned. So in my entire cross-border shipment, two items out of thousands was stuck because it was not permitted to enter that destination. Okay, so if you look at the ripple effect, it has lots of effects. We missed the entire shipment was stuck. We are not able to deliver to the customer. So there were lots of customer feedback, wrap, whatever you say. So where it went wrong. So we went back to our boardroom and we just discussed where it went. It's technology, process, whatever you talk about. Then we understood, in spite of having different type of checkpoints, we failed in that because we need to have a complete digitization. Even one item, if there is a different country of origin, it has to be stopped at the origin itself. So who can sort out all these problems? Human beings, we are 80% efficient. We need to believe in that. Even our process is 95%. Even if you go for a Six Sigma 99.5%, still the 0.5 or 0.1%, everything there is a variance. So digitization is a key. So we have seamlessly interfaced our master data with our CRM, with our complete end-to-end strategy. And now, not even one incident, we are having an issue of the entire shipment getting banned. So this is what I would like to highlight. Digitalization is need of the hour, and it has to be supported with people and process. That's what I would like to share.
That's excellent. So what you're saying to us, Srinivasan, is that you survived in this pandemic because there was some resilience that had been built in some of your business processes. But what I'd like to ask you a bit further is, do you think technology is a driver for building supply chain resilience? And if that's the case, if you think that, then what is really the component of technology that is so fundamental to drive this digitalization?
All right. We generally look at the key metrics in our entire customer journey. Very few key metrics are on time in full quantity and also the freshness of the product. How am I going to achieve in a very sustainable way? So I strongly recommend the following key digital components, which are like cloud-based. We need to move towards cloud-based in order to have a seamless journey. And we need to have integrated business planning approach, whether you can term it as connected planning or integrated business planning. I need to have a collaborative approach from top to down and bottom to the top. Then apart from that, I strongly recommend robotic process automation, which will help us to ensure accuracy, and also machine learning, which will enhance your predictive algorithm.
Excellent. So I think, you said the buzzwords, which I also use always. To drive digitalization is fundamentally, how do you change your business process? Cloud is the platform. This is where you need to make sure that, you have the latest and the greatest technology, but the technology driver is the cloud to embrace the latest of the greatest of technology to drive the transformation. Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. So, Praphul, hi Praphul. I don't think we've interacted before. It's lovely to have this conversation with you.
Same here, Baljeet.
Thank you. So Praphul, I am really intrigued by your company's logo. Right? You call it Koinearth. And right. I looked at it, and it has got two strokes, right? It has got a shorter stroke and he's got a longer stroke. And it, you know, it resonates with our discussion because the shortest stroke, if I remember from the top of my head, is a man, and the longer is the community. So that is really being very customer centric. Am I right on that one?
You're
Great,
absolutely right. So it's the logo that comes from Japan. The short stroke is the individual and the long stroke is the community. And the idea really is that the individual supports the community and the community supports the individual. Of course, we are using it in a community context where one organization is dependent on its supply chain and the supply chain depends on the organization.
Brilliant. That's what I loved about it. So I'm happy about that. So, Praphul, you know, we all been talking about, you know, Koinearth is really into this emerging technologies of the ML, the blockchains, etc. Now, the question that I'd like to ask you, Praphul, is that digital supply chains, you know, we've been talking about it. Well, let me go back, you know, from my days, and everybody talks about, first of all, we started talking about transformation. That was the buzzword. And then we started talking about digitalization. That was the buzzword. But now, you know, and since the pandemic has hit us in terms of it's all about, you know, driving this so-called digitalization, but powered with emerging technologies. And I believe now the word is advanced technologies, and this is the AIs, the blockchains, the IoTs, and stuff like that. So, Praphul, your organization is into this kind of, you know, advanced technologies. So what is the importance of this emerging technologies in your mind that really is so pivotal to build resilient supply chains and also giving that, you know, the word that everyone uses is end-to-end visibility to drive the resilience. So could you please shed some light on that one, please?
Yeah, Baljeet. So we have been talking about data. So let me start with a data point, right? In the past 6 months since COVID hit, 94% of the Fortune 1000 companies have seen supply chain disruptions. Right? First and foremost, we have to accept that this is not a discrepancy. This is the new normal, not just because of COVID, but as Dr. Rakesh said, also because of the changing geopolitical landscape. The primary implication that we see for it is that the traditional metrics based on which supply chains were designed, which was cost optimization, is no longer the only metric. We have to look at resilience, we have to look at responsiveness, we have to look at reconfigurability of supply chains. Those are now equally important. Right? Of course, one of the important things, as you said, is visibility. So let's double click on it and see what that means. Right? So if you look at it, 51% of supply chain disruptions actually occur below the first year. Now, think about that for a minute. Most organizations know how much inventory they're holding, but very few know how much inventory is actually available in their upstream or downstream supply chains. How much spare parts are there? How many components are there? Are your distributors holding inventory? Right? And I think as a result of this, what happens is that many supply chain professionals are perpetually in firefighting mode, leaving very little time for strategic planning. Right? The issue, of course, is that there is very little systemic visibility beyond the first year. So what do I mean by systemic visibility? Not that people are exchanging Excel sheets and data on an ad hoc basis. I think one of the important things that blockchain allows you to do is create a digital fabric, a shared ledger, where visibility is no longer point to point. And that really is the heart of the answer. We are not talking about point to point visibility, where two supply chain partners are sharing data between them. We are talking about a network-wide visibility of operations in real time. And that really is the heart of the change in thinking. It's a very subtle point, right? Things like EDI have existed for 3 decades, but EDIs and ERPs was always within an organization. EDI was point-to-point visibility. What we are able to do with blockchains now is network-wide visibility, right? So that is one big thing. The second thing that I want to bring to your attention is that this visibility word has another importance when it comes to responsiveness of supply chains, right? So why is responsiveness hard? Why is it hard to change your supply chain to adapt to disruptions or even to changing customer demands? Well, the issue, if you think about it a little bit, is that The B2B transactions, as we all know, are very different from B2C transactions because they are much longer in time span and they involve the flows of goods, flow of information, and flow of money. Now, to be responsive, organizations need the agility to be able to modify these flows if disruptions occur. The problem is that doing these changes in real time gets these three flows out of synchronization. So for example, can you cancel an order that you have placed on a supplier and allocate it to another supplier? Of course you can. But what are the financial implications of this? Are you under a contractual obligation to buy a minimum amount? On the other hand, on your downstream supply chain, do you allow your channel partners to return products? And if so, what happens to the contractual rebates in such a scenario? And this really brings up the dreaded word in supply chain, which we don't talk about enough, I think, is reconciliation. It's a very, very painful.
What the customer wants. I will do anything whatever the customer wants.
Reconciliation is the best word, really. So, you know, Praphul, this is all very interesting. So, you know, as your organization, you know, when you are kind of very savvy into, you know, in the so-called advanced technologies, the blockchains, the ML, the machine learning, etc., and very correctly so, is that to have that real-time visibility and data is gold dust, because people need to analyze that data. It's only when you analyze the data you understand where your blockages are and what is it that you need to, the decisions that you have to make in real time to make sure your end-to-end business processes are flawless, right? Now, you know, and again, this is really one of the ingredients of making supply chain, building the resilience business processes in supply chain. When we talk about end-to-end visibility, it's really real-time visibility. Now, you know, gone are the days, or going are the days where people used to have dashboards. Some dashboards were kind of, you know, just too outdated. There was no real-time information. Then came other analytics, which was partially kind of, you know, real-time, but with ML, with blockchain, and you know, when people are so, as you so rightly highlighted, you know, in terms of, you know, building smart contracts, because that's really having the end-to-end visibility of your peers in that blockchain. You know, if some disruption occurs, you know immediately where to fix it. Similarly, you know, as for machine learning, again, you know, algorithms, and Dr. Rakesh alluded on to beautifully. Planning is the heartbeat of, one of the heartbeats of supply chain. You need to make sure that you have the right algorithms to have build that planning. So what I was alluding on to, Praphul, with your organization and in this kind of the pandemic world and the building of resilient supply chains, are you actually seeing a lot of knocks on your door and where organizations, I need to have a blockchain ledger, I need to have ML incorporated in my business processes? Are you really seeing that difference?
Yes, that is true. I mean, definitely we have seen an increase in the way customers are approaching us. Just to share with you a personal journey of where we have been. We started in 2017 and we used to go to organizations and we used to say blockchain for your supply chain, and they used to say Bitcoin. Right.
Exactly.
And it is 2020 and the situation and how the world has changed. And people are saying, okay, I've heard about that blockchains can be used to help visibility in my supply chains. Tell me how. So the conversation has absolutely flipped from being a push thing to a pull thing, where customers are saying, I need to fix my supply chain. And I think both you and Srinivasan and Dr. Rakesh talked about it, that supply chain has become a board topic. And that is where it is getting the focus that it deserves. And it has to, right? Because the world that we live in is no longer, I mean, of course, it was a dynamic world always, but the dynamism we also always thought of in terms of the demand. Now we have to think of the dynamism in terms of supply. And that makes supply chain even harder.
No, excellent. And I think to your point, what you just so said was it's automation as well, because people are looking to automate things, making more security, you know, like, you know, smart contracts, you do, you know, governance around all of that is really driving the topic of our day today is how do you build that resilience and end-to-end visibility. So Praphul, I'm hoping that a lot of people will knock on your door to get, you know, in the machine learning, the blockchains, etc., incorporated in their business to build that resilience. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Michael, hi, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Baljeet. How are you?
Well, thank you, thank you. So, Michael, your business into supply chain junction, you're more into logistics, and hey, what a topic. During the pandemic, we saw the frontline workers beavering away, making sure that they not only provide this mask and the sanitization, etc., but also have feeding all of us, making sure the shelves are all being filled up, etc. So, you know, having a proper logistics is fundamental. And I think logistics is really, from what I look at logistics, it's really from your, from source to destination, from your suppliers, from orders to fulfillment to your start to destination, etc. So, Michael, coming from a supply chain junction, the company that you are, founder of as well, one of the services that you provide is to kind of guide organizations or customers to pick and make sure to have the right warehouse solutions, which is very interesting. And I was thinking, so may I ask you this question? What do you mean by the right warehouse management systems? And when you say, when I say right, I mean in the sense picking making sure the WMS system is right to minimize disruption and provide that end-to-end visibility. So could you please shed some light on that? Exactly what do you mean by that?
Yeah, sure, Baljeet. So yeah, I mean, firstly, I guess what we also have to do is thank all of those frontline workers who, through the crisis, actually, help to support, basic things like getting food onto shelves and medicines into pharmacies and so forth. So without them, I think, we'd all be in a lot worse place than we are today. And I mean, you asked the question about selecting a WMS. So, for as long as I think there's been warehouses, for the past 30 or 40 years, they've been supported by warehouse management system technology to help, especially large and complicated distribution centers fulfill customer orders. And we've seen, evolution of business processes, customer behavior changes, customer shopping pattern changes. We're talking a lot today about digitization, which can often be referred to as omnichannel as well. I mean, obviously, Praphul talks about blockchain. All of those things are all interlinked into that. Whether you be a retailer, whether you be, an FMCG type company, whether you be a high-tech company or a pharmaceutical company, whatever industry vertical that you're in, those companies that are processing high volumes have large differentiation or large volumes of customers, need to have sophisticated systems to help satisfy those customer needs. And that's really the foundation of what a good warehouse management system will do for them. There's many warehouse management systems out there on the market, and quite often they're built for different, different tiers and different industry verticals. So when you put all that together, it's sometimes not such a simple topic as to choose which is the right one for you. So, now also with, and I say now, but it's been around for probably 10 or so years, maybe even longer, with the advent of omnichannel, the fulfillment process, the customer order profile process has changed significantly, right? So people might order from you 3, 4, 5 times a day in small quantities. So, not only do you need the right system to fulfill that, but you'll need the right infrastructure. So infrastructure means things like warehouse layout and design, transportation networks, last mile delivery, that sort of thing. So there's a lot that goes into that, and on the surface it's a fairly simple thing, but when you get into it, there's depth.
I totally agree with you. So, again, especially for Srinivasan probably agree with me in terms of I come from Oracle, and supply chain is really my area of specialism, and in terms of logistics, right? So it's very much how do you fulfill that order orchestration, fulfillment, and also in terms of the warehouses of today. The modern warehouses are very different to the old warehouses, because now the warehouses are so kind of, you need to make sure that your stocks are being piled properly, first in, first out, etc. Temperature control types of goods, your putaways, your LPNs, because inbound, outbound, and also to make sure that you have the right capacity. You have the shipment coming in. If the shipment is docking, you need to make sure you have the right space availability to make sure where you're going to put your goods, and how you're going to stock it, and how you're going to make sure that they get picked when the order orchestration comes in, and they get delivered, and they get delivered not from the first mile, but also to the last mile. So you're absolutely right. So, and again, going back to Srinivasan, in terms of omnichannel, right? You are in that business of that, so you can see, how important it is to make sure that the items have been fulfilled from whatever warehouses you have. And it's very important to have the visibility of your stock levels and fulfillment of your goods. So Michael, do you think, when I talk about modern warehouses, and modern warehouses don't necessarily mean making sure that you have the right stocking, like shelving and so all that stuff, which is fine. You have the automation of your pick, vehicles, etc. But more specifically, are you seeing that when we talk about automation, that robotic warehouses are the next norm? Is that what you think is the next wave of automation and visibility?
Yeah. So look, we're definitely seeing that in the States and in Europe, and the software package that we work with is being built around that automation and machine learning. We're seeing it less so, but certainly there is a trend towards this in the Middle East and Africa, such that if you're in the Western world, one of the reasons that people are using robotics is the cost of humans, right? But cost is only one factor to this. It's about accuracy. It's about speed. So when you start to combine those two things together, especially from a warehouse picking and fulfillment perspective, I mean, you mentioned sort of omnichannel and order orchestration. I mean, we're seeing complex situations where some of the retailers that we service are fulfilling their customer orders from multiple places. So they could fill a component of that order from a store, and they could also fulfill a component of that order from the warehouse, right? So, which is a whole long different topic to speak about how that can work. But the point being around that is that, with the speed and velocity and the reliability that you require, we're seeing robotics, certainly in the picking area, really start to become a key trend. We're seeing lots of customers implement that, lots of customers consider that. And that sometimes is also supplementing and or replacing the traditional material handling, picking, and automation equipment that we're seeing in warehouses. So yeah, there's a very large trend towards that.
Great. I mean, this is like takes me back to the days in terms of, when I was in England and I was a financial controller, and I thought the warehouses was kind of such a dumb, dark places where you had men with overalls and driving those forklift trucks or forklift, whatever it is. But now it is really, when you look at modern warehouses with robots, it's excellent. Wow, it's kind of mind-blowing. And also, driving that throughput, which is so important for our building that end-to-end resilience, and how do you disrupt those bottlenecks in logistics?
Well, those warehouses still exist, right? Those warehouses still exist, but those are probably not the companies that are going to be around for the future.
Yes, absolutely. But now
maybe
the drivers
will be moving away. We will be moving away from static to mobile warehouses.
Exactly.
I think the drones, the truck liners can become a mobile warehouse.
Yes, absolutely. more women in supply chain and warehouse. That takes me to the next topic. Shereen, hi, how are you?
Hi, Baljeet. Nice to meet you virtually.
Hey, you know, the reason, you know, I just alluded on to this topic. It's a privilege to see you because there are not many women in supply chain, and hats off to you. And really, I sincerely mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I think what you're doing at at Heriot-Watt University as a professor teaching logistics and supply chain, I think that is hats off to you. And this is the way the world is changing. The gender is changing. It's all about diversity, and I'm very happy to have this on the panel. So, Shereen, really, I'm very excited. So tell us, how do you actually, you know, we talked about digitalization, we talked about transformation, modernization, and all those buzzwords that we have been, you know, talking about. If I was your student and I'm at university, right, and you know, supply chain used to be a very dry topic, and you know, it's not. That's why maybe the women never really got into that, etc. But I think people like yourself and myself, you know, in supply chain is really starting a new norm, if I may call it. So, Shereen, what would you, you know, we talked about organizations, you know, wanting to drive this journey through transformation, digitalization. But of course, in order to do this, there has to be some kind of policies that have to be implemented to get through this recovery of, you know, the pandemic that we're going through. So, I mean, what is your view on that? How should one start off this digitalization, you know, journeys? You know, it's all very well talking about it, but there has to be policies that have to be implemented, right? Because if these don't get implemented, you know, we can talk till the cows come home about digitalization, etc. So could you please throw some light as a professor in terms of what is your views on this, please?
Yeah. I think I just want to highlight one thing, that what happened disrupted education system as well. So especially for us in the logistics and supply chain management, it's like we had to revisit what we teach, you know, because everything changed around us, and this is something we need to update our students about it. So especially when we talk about supply chain risk management now and strategies, so we have to update all of this in response to what is happening in the business ecosystem. So in answering your question, I would like really start by highlighting some points. I think digitization is no longer optional for businesses. So as the business, they need to understand it becomes an essential for their competition. Also, important point that businesses need to know that one size fits all doesn't apply. So what works for you might not work for others, and vice versa. Also, we need to know that supply chain fundamentals didn't change, but maybe we have different tools now to manage supply chain, and we need to understand how to use these tools and manage these tools. Also important when we think about digitization to understand the business needs. Okay, so as a first point, to understand really the business need and supply chain problems that we want to digital technology to help us or to solve. So these are, I think, is a starting point before we talk about the policy or how businesses should, you know, respond to this. So I just reiterate what you said, that COVID-19 was a kind of wake-up call for businesses. So digital transformation was happening, but on much slower rates than what we saw after the pandemic. So based on that, the digital transformation companies need to urgently reassess their current business models. So they need to do so because there is there is shift towards remote working, one factor, remote working, e-commerce, enhanced supply chain, and new distribution models. And as the speakers mentioned about the customer-centric approach, we have to respond to this. So this reassessment of current business model is important, and one of the important things needs to be addressed in these models, in the revisited model, is the safety aspect for customers, for employees, and for society. And here technology will play also a big role. So for example, IoT-based communication, Bluetooth, thermal detection to detect movement of people, robotics for logistics, delivery and transportation. Privacy will not be an issue because safety will come first here. And this will require also change in the design of the workplace as well. So in terms of what they need really when we talk about this new business model, we need also to reassess the digital priorities to support this new business model. So when we talk about digital transformation, I think the downside of digital transformation, we have to think about cybersecurity. So one of the things that businesses, they need to address really how to manage the increased digital risk. So COVID-19, what COVID-19 did is actually with the increasing trend toward digital transformation, the likelihood and the impact of digital threats increased at a very high rate. The second factor also need to be considered, which is the need to have an effective online and digital presence. Since now, if we think about the traditional bricks and mortar business model across industry will no longer sustainable. So we need to address and highlight the need for this online digital presence. The other factor also needs to be considered here, adapting supporting technology and infrastructure to enable remote working and agile workforce. And that will help businesses to enhance their productivity and effectiveness of remote working, because it's a part of the new norm, and we have to accept and we have to have the right infrastructure for that to enhance.
That's perfect. What you actually just said is that, you see, and you said it really nicely. First, what are the business rules? If the rules you need to consider, what you just said is, okay, assess your as-is situation.
Yes.
Implement those policies, and what you just said is, okay, it's all about how do you drive automation, and how do we, and you said it, how do we change? It's all about, you know, changing that business platform to be more ready to absorb, to be flexible, to drive the automation and resilience that everybody's looking for. So I hope that, you know, your students, I mean today's students are, you know, I wish in my good old days we never talked about these things, but I hope your students are very savvy, and I just hope that, you know, your students of today will be the CIOs of the companies going forward. So thank you so much for such an insightful, policies to drive resilient supply chains. So I think we only got about 5 minutes left. So Dr. Rakesh, let me come to you, Dr. Rakesh. You talked about, you know, and I know you're very passionate about supply chain planning, forecasting, etc. Do you think the good old days are over in terms of where people do the planning, the way of spreadsheets, etc.? How do you think that you know, the role of big data and machine learning and all of that, is that so fundamental to especially driving this digitalization, and specifically the subject that's so close to your heart, supply chain planning? Is that something can be, you know, automated or kind of enhanced, or, you know, what should the planners do? I mean, you know, what is the role of big data there? What's the role of machine learning there when it comes to planning? You know, do these advanced technologies play a role? I think you're on mute, Dr. Rakesh.
Businesses are at inflection point. And, you know, the history of evolution says that newer technology dictates the pattern that will emerge as structures, systems, and processes to come. So yes, the answer to your question is that the planning will fundamentally change from a deterministic one to a combination of deterministic, probabilistic, and machine learning based. Why I say this is that because there are enough time for evolution of this as technology deployment takes place. One of the fundamental change that you see is that forecasting will be machine learning based primarily because if you look at the concept of big data, what it is a data whereby algorithm and inbuilt mechanism, it can actually compute large amount of unstructured data. In the old data statistics with Excel, you define your hypothesis. Here, that the unstructured data explains pattern that defines hypothesis, and that brings in a large amount of patterns of what's happening, and it brings about a very strong critical demand sensing and signals that are there. Now this would be something very interesting to have it inside the organization, and hence it's called inside out data that happens. But if you look at predictive analytics, which is also a big database, which is causal, which can actually using scenario analysis, and you see large number of players like you are trying to move towards that scenario analysis, what ifs of changing dynamics during difficult times like ours. It has affected life, it has affected livelihoods, it has affected businesses, and demand has just stopped. And demand is slowly picking up. And how would that pick up when the larger macroeconomies trouble across the globe? How do you build these scenarios? I think predictive ability of the machine learning will do. So
thank you.
Simple.
Thank you, Dr.
I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think we're on the top of the hour. I just want to conclude with everybody. Just a final quick 1-second answer. So Praphul, what would you say, what is the fundamental thing, one thing that you would say to the audience to drive end-to-end resilience and visibility in supply chain?
I think organizations need to rethink the boundary of their firm, right? The firm is now consisting of their partners, both upstream and downstream. Even though that might not be true financially, it has to be true digitally.
Great, thank you. Michael?
Listen to your customers. They're going to take you where you need to be.
Excellent. Srinivasan?
Listen to so as Michael said, listen to the customer and please build a ERP which has to sail through from the supplier until to the customer end. A seamless ERP journey is required.
Thank you. Shereen?
Yeah, to build the agility in both upstream and downstream supply chain.
Right. Well, I think we've come to the top of the hour, and really, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure to interact with you. And from the bottom of my heart, I hope that your businesses flourish, and most of all, stay safe and healthy. And Dr. Rakesh, thank you once again for inviting me to this panel, and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Baljeet, for conducting this panel.
Thank you, Baljeet.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Baljeet, hi. You've got questions on your WhatsApp from the audience. You can ask them.
Yeah, there are 2 relevant questions. If you can take that up, please.
In my WhatsApp? Okay. Okay, so maybe I can ask that to Praphul.
Sure.
Okay, Praphul, the question here is that it's all about, utilization and regulations of blockchain use in the US. What are the main barriers in implementing a system like blockchain when the contractual terms are still being developed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we see this very often. So there are 2 aspects to that question, that my contracts are in perpetual flux. And as you can imagine in a real world scenario, my contractual terms with one supplier or distributors are different from the contractual terms that I have with another business or supplier. So there are 2 ways we have solved this problem from a technology perspective. One is that our platform, for example, we have a pre-built library of contractual terms, but if you need to change them, we do not require code changes. So it's kind of like, think of it like your Outlook rules engine, right? Where you can go and configure your out of office. In the same way, you can configure smart contract rules in a very similar fashion. And you can keep a running library of these, which you can collate into several versions. So you can have a version 1 of the contract, version 2 of the contract, and version 3 of the contract. That's part 1. The second part is, at the time that the order is being placed between party A and party B, you can select which contract version will be applicable to this particular order. That is really very important because, as you can understand, we understand that contractual terms change, nothing is static, and by giving the flexibility to the buyers that at the time of placing the order, you can select which version of the contract you want to use, and then the underlying system will take the enforcement. We are able to satisfy that. Now, to the last point about regulatory concerns, we don't really see any regulatory challenges in private blockchains that we work on primarily. But on public blockchains, yes, that varies from country to country. So whether or not you put a certain transaction on the public blockchain is completely configurable on the system. So you can choose to do it or you can choose not to do it.
Great. Thank you. Kathleen, I hope you got your answer. Michael, the next question is for you. Is there a transition you are witnessing from warehouse automation to even cross-docks and hub automation, as well as interconnected distributors? At the customer end, you stocking predominantly seen in retail. So,
well, there's a lot to that question. So, yeah, there's definitely a transition. You know, and it depends on the types of goods and the types of companies as to that transition. So I'm not sure which vertical that specific person is in, because they obviously didn't tell us.
I think it's retail, probably retail. Yeah,
but so whether it's grocery, you know, fashion, whatever, right? So you know, what we typically see from a digitization omni perspective in both fashion and retail is that when the end customer has ordered online and the fulfillment mechanism is from the warehouse, that cross-dock process then needs to go through a couple of extra steps. And that step is to actually deconsolidate to the e-com type area for fulfillment. And that is typically being done nowadays through material handling equipment. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Shiba, that's, again, I can give you some insight there because I work with this, so modern warehouses and customers, especially FMCG, definitely cross-docking and hub, where, you know, you can do a lot of this with the, you know, with the LPNs, and how do you actually, it's really how do you actually, as Michael said, you know, from a factory to the destination where you store the goods, whether it's in a pallet or whether it's in cartons, etc., and how do you load, and all of that is doable in the modern warehouses. So thank you, Michael, and thank you, Praphul, and Shiba, and Kathleen. I hope you got your answers, but we are sorry we ran out of time, and I'm sure that if you post your questions, I'm sure the panelists would love to answer your questions through email. So once again, the panelists, thank you so much, and bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your wonderful insights.